We're going to be talking about chemtrails and weather manipulation. And let me share with you something before I introduce my guest this morning. What happened to me years ago, I started watching the clouds basically take over Florida and these chemtrails take over Florida, and I simply didn't want to believe that they were actually spraying something on us. This is back in the 90s. Then suddenly back, I think it was around 97, we had a problem with the Mediterranean fruit fly here in Florida, and they decided they were going to spray the entire central Florida area with malathion from the air. And they came in, they warned us on the news that night that they were going to be coming over the next day with DC-3s loaded down with malathion, with their jets basically pouring out poison, xenoestrogen toxins into the entire environment, into the lakes, into the homes. And they warned pregnant women not to go outside and be exposed and keep their children inside. And I stood there helplessly as I watched DC-3s fly over my home. And as they got closer to my house, I could see the streams of malathion pouring off the wingtips. And I thought, this is insane. I cannot believe they're spraying its deadly neurotoxin on us because of some stupid Mediterranean fruit fly. Finally, folks went to Tallahassee, and they basically sued the state of Florida for allowing it. They were able to shut them down to a federal court judge. So years later, I started looking at the clouds, and I started seeing more and more and more of the chemtrails, and I didn't want to believe it, but I had remembered what they had done with the malathion. And so about 3 or 4 years ago, after 2 really heavy consecutive days of spraying, I took water samples 6 months apart, and I sent them to a laboratory. Basic laboratory, but I think it was called a basic laboratory in Wigington, California, and I had them tested for barium and aluminum. And the barium and aluminum was so high in both the rain samples that basically the EPA said that they were toxic to drink. That got my attention because we don't have plants that release barium and aluminum into the atmosphere in Florida. We're on a peninsula, and our air state's pretty fresh here except for that mess they spray on us every day. Then all of a sudden, all of our citrus crops started to die because I'm assuming because of the aluminum was so toxic in its ability to kill plants. So that's why I wanted to bring Dane on, because then I started doing research on this, and I started listening to all of Dane's emails and basically research projects on YouTube, and he's probably the most noted person I've ever met, or not personally met, but we'll meet in just a second over the telephone. Today, Dane Wigington is going to join us for discussion on how the Earth weather systems are being deliberately manipulated. Dane has been documenting the disturbing changes in the environment, such as chemtrails and HAARP. And basically, Dane Wigington has an extensive background in solar energy. I've also got solar panels on my house, and I was told that my 10K system was supposed to put out X amount of energy, and it has never produced what it was supposed to, not one time. And the reason for that is we have global dimming as far as I'm concerned. I believe Dane said the same thing. Good morning, Dane. I hope you liked the introduction I just gave you.
Thank you. Thank you for the research that you've done and the actual investigation you've done. If we had more radio hosts that would take that time and actually look, we might have this issue out in the open already, Ted.
Well, you're absolutely right. In fact, I used the same laboratory that you were holding up with a little sheet of paper that you were showing that you had crossed it out a little bit. I could still read it on one of your videos. I said, I'm going to the same lab that Dane did. At least they're giving you accurate results.
They were. At least they were. Yeah, not anymore.
Well, no, it was so fun. No, it's funny you said that, because the last one that I sent, that same lab, I got different results, and I thought, how strange is that? So I think that somebody must have said something to somebody.
We have a new lab owner here, and he's actually told people that suggested that aluminum is normal to have in everything, which is absolutely patently false. So we've definitely lost the credibility of that lab. We're experiencing the same thing with tests we know have aluminum in it. We've actually duplicate sampled. We're seeing this at a lot of labs. It's pretty alarming, whether the lab owner just doesn't want in the middle of the controversy or there's something coming from somewhere else, because we have so many labs. We've had so many tests done there. We can speculate on that, but the bottom line is the tests are definitely not credible from that lab anymore.
Well, what's interesting about that is that, what we're going to have to do is get a mass spectrometer. That's what we're going to have to do. I mean, I remember we had one at Florida State University when I was in graduate school there, and I remember the mass spectrometers are pretty expensive back then, but they may have come down in price. You can probably get them used. But that way we can do our own lab analysis on our own water samples and not have to deal with these independent laboratories that may or may not have been compromised. I agree with you 100%.
I'll tell you a story about that when we get back off the break.
You heard the music. I like you, Dane. You're good. We'll be right back with Dane Wigington. Dane, you said that yesterday you did a video on what was going on with the weather system and how it's being manipulated and how they forced all of the snow up into the northeast. Can you go over that with me real quick, please?
Actually, I did an article, and this is on the under the recent column at the homepage of geoengineeringwatch.org. It's under top stories.
Okay, give me your website again,
geoengineeringwatch.org.
Okay, everybody write that down, geoengineeringwatch.org. And do you have a newsletter you send out, Dane?
We do. If people sign up, we're the largest hub on the planet for this information. We do not sell anything. We are non-political. The only goal of the site is to get the word out, period. And I want to point out to your listeners, Ted, that it's extremely important to get traction on this issue. They must use the science terms. They must use the terms climate engineering, solar radiation management, geoengineering. Those terms are extremely important because the chemtrails term, although it's more descriptive, it is the term that has been intentionally marginalized by the power structure. In fact, if people Google Dane Wigington, David Pakman's a mainstream media hitman. When you're making too much progress, they stick David after you. If you see a 15-minute interview with me and David, you will see how emphatically he insisted that I use the chemtrails term. It's very revealing. So, again, it's important. The semantics very much matter here. So the science terms, climate engineering, solar radiation management, very important. But Winter Storm Juno, this is named by Weather Channel. They name the storms to make them more theatrical. At the same time, Winter Storm Juno was happening with moisture straight off the record warm Atlantic Ocean. It's being chemically ice nucleated. There's no question about that. We've had lab tests from previous storms. We can see on the radar where they're chemically nucleating, where the rain just flashes out to snow. This is a patented process with patents going back to 1950 to chemically nucleate what should be rain into snow. People can Google Chinese scientists create artificial snowstorm. They were very open about it until they did $1 billion worth of damage to Beijing. This is hard science. It's hard fact. Mainstream media covered it. Again, people have no idea the degree to which the weather is being manipulated, Ted. They have no idea.
Well, the thing that saddens me, Dane, is that the I get blank stares. This weekend I was over at a bakery shop in Yalaha, Florida. They have all organic German bread, and basically, my parents being from Germany, I really like German food because that's what we used to eat at home all the time. So this guy's German. His name's Jürgen Klum, and he has a great bakery. It's called Yalaha. It's an all-organic German bakery, German desserts, all that kind of stuff up in Yalaha, Florida. And it was interesting. We were there. And some guys who were too well-to-do, you could tell they were yuppies, they were wealthy. The guy was probably either a doctor or an attorney. They were driving a beautiful Harley, which I really love the way Harleys look and sound. I just don't like the way they ride because they don't handle real well. But I love the bikes themselves because they're just the prettiest bike on the planet. And anyhow, I was talking to them about their bikes, et cetera, and they were spraying us extremely heavy down here with the chemtrails on Saturday. It was almost like a joke. And I looked outside and I said, guys, I love motorcycles, but I have a real hard time having forced ventilation under my helmet, having to breathe all of this unbelievable toxic stuff from the geoengineering that they're doing on the planet. Basically, their excuse is to stop the global warming. And they looked at me like I had a third head, or it was unbelievable. I couldn't even. It was the strangest look because either you have, and that's the response you get most of the time, Dane. Either people say, "Well, what do you mean by that? Can you explain it?" Which is like 10% of the time. The other 90% of the people, because of normalcy bias, they don't want to believe it. But when I saw them spray malathion on us, Dane, I believe they'll do anything to us.
They will, and they have, and they are. And when you're introducing this to other people, what's very helpful, Ted, is to have something to pass on to them. We have color flyers at the homepage of Geoengineering Watch. You can download them for free, print them in your location. There's several varieties there. And if you have a color informational flyer, or, it doesn't have to be color, but if you have something credible with some data on it to pass on to people where you don't have to go into a long oral dissertation, you can just say this is happening, our media's not telling us about it, the government's not telling us about it. Well, that's pretty easy for people to believe now. And if you pass that on, it's a little better. It's a much better key to the door. People will. Well,
I'm going to do that. I didn't know you had that available. Give me that website again, Dane.
Geoengineeringwatch.org. We have about 20,000 visits a day on our site, and the global community is waking up to this issue, thankfully, finally. And to give you an idea how much metal is falling on us, Ted, we have seen soil pH values in the Pacific Northwest, where I live, change 10 to 12 times toward alkaline. It takes an incredible amount of metal to change soil pHs. It's killing trees, killing the forest,
killing our citrus trees out here. Hang on, I got to say something real quick. Okay, I'm watching my board light up. I've got all these people trying to call right now. I'm not going to take any phone calls until the bottom of the hour. So you guys, at the bottom of this hour, like in 15 minutes, we're going to take phone calls. I know everybody wants to talk to Dane. I've got to let him get his information out the first half. I've already had like 75 phone calls try to come through to you already, Dane, in the last few minutes. And luckily my board operator knows not to take phone calls right now. So if you're getting busy signals or you're basically disconnects, please forgive us for doing that. But I don't want you to stay on hold for half an hour. But in 15 minutes, we're opening the phone lines up because this single-handedly is the biggest issue on the planet today. Now, let me tell you why I feel that way. I drink distilled water. I make sure I alkalinize it before I drink it. And we're going to talk about alkalinity in just a second. I eat non-GMO food. I make sure that my kids are the same. I do everything I possibly can to stay healthy. What really irritates me, and it must make me to say a couple bad words to get me in trouble again. It wasn't me saying the bad words last time, but every once in a while I slip and say something bad. But this really irritates me. They make me breathe their stinking air that has all this aluminum in it, and it goes right into the brain, into the olfaction center, according to Dr. Blaylock, which I know he's right on that because I'm a scientist too. And they poison us with this stuff. And there's nothing we can do unless we want to walk around with a double can respirator all the time, making ourselves look like we're nuts, and nobody wants to believe it. But I'm going to go to your website, and I'm going to start printing these things out. I'm going to keep these in my car, and I'm going to give these out to people that I think might want to wake up. Go ahead, Dane.
It works exponentially better than anything you can orally say to anyone. And again, as you correctly stated, and obviously by your dialogue, Ted, you've done significant research here. If we had more in the radio industry that would, we'd have this out in the open. And why this issue? Why have I focused the last 12 years of my life on this issue 24/7? Because this is the hole in the bottom of the boat. If we don't deal with this, nothing else will matter. This is an all-out assault against Earth's life support systems. People ask why? Because this is the power structure's mentality. They think they can control everything. Their attempt is to control everything, and as they have tried over 6+ decades in the case of the climate, that's how long this has been going on at lower levels, they have increasingly decimated Earth's natural systems. The more damage they do, the more they derail the system, the more they ramp up their programs to try to counterbalance that. It's a very vicious downward spiral. So now we have a shredded ozone layer, toxified soils, toxified air. The UV that's coming through now from the destroyed ozone layer is slaughtering global plankton supplies. Their populations are down 50 to 60%. No plankton, no life on Earth, no ozone layer, no life on Earth. This is the epitome of human insanity. It's the pharmaceutical approach to planet Earth that, just like what we see on TV, you take this for treating one thing and there's 20 other things that are 100 times worse. It's the same sort of mentality, Ted. But again, if we continue on this path, it's game over. It's that simple for people.
But now, everybody listen to me for a second. I've got a degree in biological science and chemistry from Florida State University. I was trained as a biologist. I was trained as a chemist. Okay, I understand what he's talking about. Now, a lot of you don't understand this, but I'm going to tell you something very simple. Soil pH is so critical because plants have to be in a very narrow bandwidth, depending on the particular plant, of what pH or what alkalinity or acidity the soil has to be. If the acidity of the soil is too acid or if the alkalinity is too high, what happens is the feeder roots can't absorb nutrients properly. The same thing is true with the human body. Our urine needs to be a pH of around 6.4, and so does our saliva. If our pH in our urine goes up too high or too low, what ends up happening, our body stops being efficient as far as absorbing nutrients. This is exactly what happens in the soil. And when the soil gets too alkaline or too acid with the aluminum and the barium, these are alkaline salts, and what happens is it pushes the pH up. And when that happens, the feeder roots can't absorb nutrients. This is what I feel is one of the primary reasons that our entire citrus crop in Florida has got the doggone blight, because it's gotten so weak, the blight's taken over, and we're losing the entire citrus industry in Florida because of this. And Dane is exactly right. This is an all-out assault on the entire planet. Go ahead, Dane.
Everything you said is absolutely spot on. And the one key thing you said is depending on the organism, because some people get confused. We had dialogues with biologists from areas in Montana that have naturally alkaline soils, and so they were perplexed at our pH raising. Soils vary from region to region, so people need to take this into account. Right. But this does naturally raise acidic soils, or it raises naturally acidic soils, I should say. And so we've seen our soils here in California go from, when we have the baselines, by the way, so we know what we're talking about, 5.4, 5.5 up to 6.6, 6.8. 1 point on that scale is a magnitude of 10. People don't realize that.
Logarithms, right.
So, but we also have soil study, peer-reviewed study from world-recognized institutions like UC Riverside. The bioavailable aluminum has a very profound effect on the root systems as well, in addition to the changing pH. And organisms sense that contamination, and they shut down nutrient uptake to protect their DNA. So, again, from all angles, plus we have the UV now. We're seeing UVB levels, Ted, that are 1,000% higher than we're being told. We're told by all major agencies that UVB is no more than 5% of all incoming UV. We are metering this with state-of-the-art meters in California, Maine, Florida. We're seeing UVB levels higher. We're actually seeing UVC as well. This is important. UVC is the last band of UV before X-ray. We're told UVC stops at 100,000 feet up in the atmosphere. They are destroying the ozone layer by the day.
Well, what's interesting to me about this is this. If this doesn't really hack you off, I'm trying not to use the P word, if this doesn't really hack you off and make you unbelievably angry, I don't know what else to say to you on this show tomorrow morning to get you more hacked off. I mean, this irritates me beyond belief. I don't even want to ride my motorcycle anymore because of this, because I don't want to have this stuff force-fed up my mask and up into my nasal cavities. I mean, I am so aggravated by all of this, and there's nothing we can do because a bunch of this stuff now is all black ops for the United States government from the CIA. You know that's what's going on too, Dane. And the craziest thing is we're trying to figure this out by telling our congressmen. The congressmen don't even know what's going on, and they don't want to believe the truth.
Correct.
When we come back from the break, we'll talk more about this. You're talking and listening to a very irritated Ted Brower this morning, and I'm trying my best to retain my language. I try to be a Christian most of the time, and now you're all going to laugh at me for that because if you're a Christian, you know what I mean. Sometimes I'm a better Christian than I am at other times. This is one of these little things that makes me very difficult to be a Christian and not say something bad because I try not to talk like that anymore because I know it's not the best thing for me or anybody else. But as you guys probably already know, since you've heard me doing this show now for George for months now, I'm pretty type A. And this is one of these topics that is just a open sore on me because I got to breathe the stinking air, and I'm aggravated with it. Dane, tell me about the CIA. Tell me about who's doing the spraying, and tell me why Congress doesn't know anything about this. All my lines are lit up. You guys don't even try to call now. Go ahead, Dane. Tell me why.
Many in Congress do know. They are simply not willing to discuss this issue. They know that's a career decision or worse. I've been in Barbara Boxer's office. I've been in high-level EPA meetings in Sacramento at the Capitol, arranged by a congressional rep. I had a meeting almost a year ago with Lieutenant Governor Gavin Newsom in his office with his aide, presenting satellite data imagery that could not be denied. I told them at that time if this satellite blanket spraying that we see continued, California would enter the most protracted drought ever recorded by far. It's exactly what happened. There's no question Gavin knows. These people simply will not speak out, and it's up to us to bring it to a level of public awareness where they no longer have the choice. Again, the gravity of this issue cannot be overstated. We're all part of a grand and lethal experiment that will and is determining our collective futures. That's how lethal this issue is. So, and I had direct communication with one of the architects of these programs from a major lab. I've assured him that I would not disclose his identity, but this is what he said to me, Ted. The government will try with everything it has to suppress knowledge of these programs because if the public found out, and I'm quoting him directly, they would seek out those responsible and hang them or shoot them in front of a firing squad. Those involved with these programs absolutely know how lethal these programs are and how the public will react if they ever find out. It's up to us to bring these programs to light. If we don't, nothing else will matter. This is an all-out assault against the entire web of life. Our health is waning. All of us, whether people admit it or not, doesn't matter. Whether they deny it or not, doesn't matter. We know the materials in the air. We've done lab tests, 70 in California alone. We have lab tests from all over the globe, and we know we're breathing it, and we know the effect. This is a cut and dried equation.
Dane, I want you to tell me right now why in the world that the CIA is involved in this and why this is black ops.
Well, these programs, again, the more damage they've done by using weather warfare, and that's what this amounts to. It's weather warfare. It's been used against adversarial countries. It's being used against the U.S. population right now. And the more damage they have done, the more they have ramped up these programs to try to cover up that damage. We've seen this before, Ted. You remember in the Gulf of Mexico with the Macondo oil well, the major oil well leak, they used the chemical Corexit, which is banned throughout the globe. They used it here. By the environmental impact reports that we have, Corexit made the Gulf oil spill 52 times more toxic.
That's right.
But
and now all the shellfish are almost toxic in the Gulf oil spill.
Correct.
Also, what's interesting to me about all of this is the fact that the vast majority of the people in the United States don't realize that our CIA is involved in this. Tell them how they do this and tell me the name of the organization that does the spraying. And is this also being done on commercial aircraft?
Evergreen is one of the companies, and that is the type of company you described. And just to finish that one thought, the Corexit was used to hide the problem, even though it made it exponentially worse. Geoengineering is in the same category. They at this point are simply trying to hide the damage done by doing even more damage. Now we have mass methane release in the Arctic, which is a global game changer. Encourage people to investigate that between the methane release, the shredded ozone layer, the toxification of the soils, which is killing the boreal forest, which decreases our oxygen. This is a very, very vicious downward cycle. It will determine our common futures if we do not expose it and stop it.
So basically, they're terraforming the planet.
There's no other term for it. When you alter the natural ecosystems, that's the correct term.
Okay, we got a full board of phone calls. If you guys got in, congratulations. We're playing rotary chairs here this morning. We'll come right back from this break, and guys, open phone calls for Dane's and take as many calls as we can. Guys, I'm going to try to take at least 50 phone calls the next half hour. So please forgive me if I cut you off. Stay tuned. Give me the sentence that you just gave me, Dane. I want everybody to listen to this sentence. Go ahead, Dane.
For those with the normalcy bias that you correctly described earlier, Ted, there's some facts that they should consider. In the last 40 years, human population has doubled, and we have global wildlife populations declining by almost two-thirds. Based on what we already know, the data we already have with the shredded ozone layer, with the soil toxification, with the atmospheric disruption that we see, right now it's a mathematical certainty. If we continue in this trajectory, we will, in the short-term time horizon, have a planet that does not support life. Again, this is a mathematical fact. We are in the 6th great mass extinction as we speak. We're losing 200 species of plant and animal every single day to global extinction, and that's 10,000 times background, because a lot of people will say that's normal. It's not normal to lose 10,000 times the amount of species to extinction than the background rates. So again, we are in free fall right now toward a planet that will not support life in the short-term time horizon. That's how dire our situation is.
Okay, now I'm going to repeat what you just said. Everybody listen to me. I mean, and forgive me, I'm not trying to be condescending or talk down to anybody. I'm just really irritated right now, okay? And no, I haven't drunk coffee this morning. I'm just really ticked off, okay? Because I have to breathe this crap, excuse my language, that everybody else has to breathe. He just said that if we continue doing this, we're going to be on a planet that will no longer support life. Now, I don't know what these crack-smoking, meth-head people are doing that are spraying us and why they think this is okay, but Dane just said something that's the absolute truth. If we continue this, we're going to be on a planet that will no longer sustain human life. Now, what the heck are they trying to do here? Is this a global population reduction on steroids? Don't they understand that they've got to breathe the air too? Okay, I got to calm down. One of my favorite callers just called in, Francis, North Carolina. Go ahead.
There you are. Hey, fellas. Oh, gosh.
Go ahead, Francis. I know. Go ahead. You say what you want to say. I'm with you.
I got 2 points for you. One, there's such a thing as what's called righteous anger.
That's right.
So
I'm there.
Don't be sweating over that part. Secondly, as far as the chemtrail spraying is concerned, I've been with that for many, many years. Quite frankly, when you have the politicians being in the pockets of these hate mongers and all that are spraying the garbage and all that really don't care about human life or other species, the only way you're going to get rid of that is to get rid of the politicians, clean house in D.C., and then you'll end up getting rid of those corporations that are spraying that garbage and committing basically genocide. Period.
We're looking at actually omnicide. We're looking at a destruction of all life at this point. It's not just the human race. We're talking about a planet that mathematically will not support any life. We're
talking Mars here.
It's omnicide. That's exactly what we're talking about. So, again, they are trying to hide the magnitude of the damage they have already done by doing even more damage while they are literally digging into underground bases, and they literally are. I encourage people to Google DUMS, deep underground military bases. I've done presentations on this showing the entrances. We talked to Mountain House Foods, which is a major freeze-dried food supplier. They were actually off retail for a very extended time while they were supplying some of these bases. I mean, this is the end game playing out right now. If we do not deal with this situation, nothing else will matter.
Y'all have a good one.
Go ahead, Francis.
Y'all have a good one. Take care.
Thanks so much, Francis. Okay, I got to make a comment here. This is important. Here's the deal, okay? what in the HE double sticks do they think they're doing here as far as destroying their own planet that they've got to live on? What do they think they're going to come out to when they come out of their deep underground military bases if the entire ecosystem is destroyed and the Earth can no longer produce oxygen? I mean, what are these people smoking? I'm just going to, I got to calm down. Okay, yeah, Helen in Georgia. Go ahead, Helen in Georgia. Go ahead, Helen, Georgia. Forgive me for my anger.
Hello.
Hey, go ahead, Helen.
I wanted to report on the peaceful demonstration that was put on in Atlanta, Georgia at the Weather Channel. I attended it. It was put on by Greg Palin and Mary Lou Harris, and we actually braved bitterly cold, blustery winds in a really cold day. We had maybe 30 to 40 people turn out, which we would have liked to have had 300 or 400, but given it was rather short notice and what the blustery cold day we had to brave, we had former Representative Cynthia McKinney showed up there and is a really truly beautiful, bubbly, wonderful spirit. She helped us. And
if I could point out something, Helen, about the Weather Channel, why that's important, because people might not understand why it's important. Weather Channel is owned by the power structure, Bain Capital, Blackstone, the rest. The power structure controls the weather dissemination. People need to understand that. The weather dissemination is now designed to make the completely engineered and unnatural appear natural. So all these meteorologists that are participating should be considered accessories to the crime. If we could expose this issue, people that have participated in this manner should be put on trial, like the Nuremberg trials. We know that Raytheon, defense contractor Raytheon, that's completely up to their neck in weather modification programs, does all the weather modeling for the National Weather Service and NOAA. Lockheed Martin does all the weather modeling, also up to their neck in weather mod. They do the weather modeling for the FAA, so you have the foxes literally running the hen house. Their job is to make the American population believe that these experiments that are going on are just natural weather. And again, these people should be considered accessories to the crime. That's why it was important to expose the Weather Channel. People need to understand who's running things, and I don't want anybody to believe me. Please do not believe me. Investigate the research that we post. We don't sell anything. Our only goal is to sound the alarm on what will determine our collective futures if it continues.
Thank you for calling, Helen. You know what's interesting to me with this whole thing, Dane, is that we're in a situation here that nobody wants to talk about because the probable outcome if it doesn't stop is so awful that nobody wants to look at the downside on this, which is basically planetary extinction. And the sad part about it is these idiots that are doing this, and that's the only word I can use that's going to be socially acceptable on the show this morning, are basically thinking that this is okay. I don't know what religion they practice, what Lucifer God they have that they're basically worshiping and bowing down to, that they think this is okay. But this thing is nuts. It's been nuts since they started it. And we need to go ahead and expose it on this show. You guys need to write your congressman who are listening today and tell them you've had enough of this. Go to Dane's website, download the color brochures, mail them to the congressman. Any more comments before we go back to the show?
Two things I can state very quickly. One, the vast majority of people participating in these programs, especially in the military, are being told they're doing something for the common good. They need to wake up. This is not for the common good. It's not benevolent in any way, shape, or form. Two, there's an app called SkyderAlert.com, SKYDER Alert.com. That app can be used to send immediate messages with photographs taken from your iPhones or whatever else to congressmen, legislators in your area. SKYDER Alert.com, another great tool for sounding the alarm.
What's your website again, Dane?
Geoengineering Watch, the letters GEO, engineeringwatch.org.
Geoengineeringwatch.org. Dane Wigington, I want everybody to get on his newsletter list. I want everybody to go to his site. I want you to take all your little pages that you have on your Yahoo and your Gmail and all the other websites that we use that are all being monitored anyhow, and I want you to link every single person and send everybody emails. Say, go to this website and listen to this guy. He knows what he's talking about. He's the foremost authority on this in the world. Download the color brochures and give them out to people. This is so important.
We have a free app there, too, Ted. There's a free app for Geoengineering Watch for people that have mobile devices.
Excellent. Joey in Missouri, go ahead.
This morning I had an amazing dream that was so vivid about Air Force just looking like zombies in the sky, pouring this stuff out in mass, and I'm in the target zone, the crossroads of everything, Monsanto, geoengineering, you name it. I'm in Kansas City, and it is crazy. I got one of the digital meters slapped on me back in February of 2014, living without electricity since June of 2014, because I wouldn't accept it. And I understand that also these wireless devices and digital meters work in conjunction with the chemtrails. We have, like, basically, we're zero. You know what I mean?
Joy, that's your call. Dane, I want to ask you, Joy. Look, Dane, I want to ask you this real quick. They say that the over the horizon weather radar, basically the penetrating ground radar that they have is basically accentuated and made more efficient by the use of metallic ions in the atmosphere. The ground penetrating, I believe it's called the scalar radar systems and the military systems. Is there any truth to that the military could be using the additional metallic ions in the atmosphere to increase their abilities to see things with radar radar systems, and also with messing up the guidance of incoming ballistic missiles? Go ahead.
That's the stated purpose of the globe's ionosphere heaters. This is like the HARP facility. People have heard that acronym, High Frequency Active Auroral Research Program. But this is a ground-based, we think there's about 2 to 3 dozen of the large ground-based facilities around the globe. So people understand, so your listeners understand, these ground-based facilities can transfer immense amounts of power into the atmosphere. In the case of HARP, 3.5 billion watts, billion with a B. That causes an electrical chain reaction in the ionosphere, which heats it. Stated military purpose is to cause a bulge in space to create resistance to an incoming ICBM. But we know that this is the mechanism they are using to steer the jet stream with a more conductive atmosphere. The metallic particles are conductive. The atmosphere is thus more conductive. We are more conductive, by the way, too, Ted. We're now like walking in tennis, so we're all more susceptible to these radio frequencies, which are bombarding everything, which we have peer-reviewed study that proves they kill organisms like trees. So we're being bombarded from every direction, toxic materials, radio frequency, but by changing the pressure zones on the ground, they can manipulate the jet stream, and they are doing exactly that. That's how the ridiculously resilient ridge, this is the meteorological term that's being used for the ridge that is blocking all precipitation from coming into California. And on Geoengineering Watch, we have satellite imagery of a jet stream coming from west to east across the Pacific that looks like it's hitting a wall when it gets off the coast of California.
Okay, let me interrupt you for 1 second, okay? That's important. God, this everything I should have had you on for 2 hours this morning. I have been told by one of the top scientists in the country that the reason they put that high-pressure ridge there outside of California was to stop the radiation impact from Fukushima from hitting California from the weather being brought in. Is there any truth to that?
I would dispute that statement because we saw the same pattern set up 4 years before Fukushima even happened.
And so what is their purpose of doing this? Just to dry out California, destroy the food supply?
I believe there's a number of purposes. One, this is the mechanism they're using to cool the eastern half of the U.S. lower 48, by the way, which in the entire year of 2014 was the most anomalously cold place in the entire world, the eastern half of the U.S. lower 48. Why is that? Because that confuses and perplexes people. They can't understand the true state of the global climate when they're cold all the time, but that is the coldest place on the planet Earth, and that's 1/200th of the Earth's surface area. Not very much, but it confuses the U.S. population. So when you create the high-pressure zone over the west, that spins clockwise in the northern hemisphere. That spins the jet stream up over through Alaska, which had its warmest year ever also, by the way, and then that spins the jet stream down and cools then the eastern half of the country while the western half fries. So California is a climate sacrifice zone, and on top of that, again, if people are mired in their own struggle, they don't know where their next bite of food's coming from, you're controlling the food supply. I believe there's multiple agendas for everything that's happening. It's not just this or that, it's many things. So
tell me about methane release.
Methane release is a global game changer. There's frozen methane deposits on the sea floor. It's called methane hydrate. We have relief happening now. There's enough methane mathematically in the East Laptev Sea in the Arctic to cause a Permian-style mass extinction on the planet 100 times over. There's enough methane to turn our planet into Venus, and it's starting to release now, and geoengineering is making it worse overall, not better. Climate engineering has changed upper-level wind currents, as I just described. That's changing ocean currents. Now we have warm water pumping straight into the Arctic. That's thawing methane. It's a feedback loop. Methane hits the atmosphere. Over a several-month horizon, methane can be hundreds of times more potent a greenhouse gas than CO2. So methane is the real issue that will determine our fate, our collective fate. And again, it's happening now. I encourage people to Google Arctic methane emergency to find out more about that.
Well, in addition to that, people need to realize that, you know, if this doesn't get your attention this morning, if you haven't heard enough yet to say, wow, this is nuts, if you've never heard any of this before, you can go to the Power Hour Mall. There's all kinds of stuff like what in the world are they spraying, who in the world is spraying. There's all kinds of videos, DVDs, books on this topic. Go to the Power Hour Mall. Go to Dane's website to sign up for his email website, his free email that he sends out. I'm going to do that as soon as I get off the air today. And realize this, guys. This man's telling you the truth. He has no alternative for this. He's not trying to sell anything. He doesn't sell anything on his website. He's out there as basically someone who's the tip of the spear, the lightning rod, so to speak, to try to expose all of this. He should be on every major talk show in the United States. He's on a major one today. I know you've already been on with Alex Jones, haven't you?
For a brief period, but I appreciate Alex is covering this issue. Again,
well, the reason for that is we're not the only people talking about this.
I'm on about a dozen radio shows.
But everybody's got to realize that Dane is trying to tell the people the truth of what's going on, where it's happening, why it's happening, who's doing it, and we need to listen to him. We need to support the guy by going to his website. What's your website again, Dave?
Geoengineeringwatch.org.
Okay, because everybody write that down. Okay, let's go back to the telephones. We got a full board. Bob in Michigan, go ahead.
My call. Thanks for taking the call. I want to add one other resource on this: the electromagnetic scalar weapons that are being used in an authoritative book. It's by Dr. Tom Bearden. It's called Fertilance. It gives you the structure, the scientific background of it. Not only are they using that to potentiate the particles in the air, but they're literally steering the weather across the planet, especially in this country. There's a whole bunch of intrigue that I won't go into. May I give his website out?
Go ahead, Bob. I mean, we're all in this mess together. Go ahead.
Okay. The website is Shenny, and it's spelled CHENIRE, Shenny.org. It's the Tom Bearden website. The book is Fertilance. This thing was printed originally. They were ready to be sent out, and the storehouse that they were having them in before shipping was burned down. They had to reprint them. This is a absolutely authoritative book on it, and they are using modified radar units to do this over the horizon. I could go into a lot of other stuff, but there's weather patterns all over the world, especially in this country, to negatively impact the gross national product and the farm production. So,
Bob, thank you so much. You know, Dane, I've been all over the world, and I've seen this stuff everywhere, including South America, Europe. The only place I haven't seen it is China, because the air is so polluted there you couldn't see anything anyhow, and Russia. I've not seen any chemtrail spraying in Russia, and I've seen none in China, but that doesn't mean they're not being effective, because they're spraying this stuff so high up in the atmosphere, it's circling the globe now. And I mean, it's just unbelievably bad. I remember that storm they had, Katrina, a few years ago. It looked like it was almost, in fact, the weather guy said on my show here in Central Florida when it hit New Orleans, right beside New Orleans, he said, it's so strange, it's almost as if the storm is being steered towards New Orleans.
We know that storms. Hurricane Sandy should be a huge example for that. There's no chance that they could know Sandy would take an unprecedented 90-degree westerly turn 7 days ahead of time. They can absolutely steer these storms.
Unbelievable. When we come back from the break, last segment with Dane, and get ready. We're going to try to go to the rest of the phone calls. I want you to tell me real quick, what was the whole deal here with the amount of aluminum and barium you found in the snow on Mount Shasta in California?
Those particular tests off the side of Mount Shasta, which is considered a pristine water source, it's anything but now, were taken by a former U.S. Forest Service biologist, 35-year veteran, and there were samples of snow that contain 61,000 parts per billion of aluminum. This is inconceivably high. And so, again, there's nothing natural about this. Anybody who says there is simply uninformed, completely ignorant. Yes, aluminum is a very common element, but it does not exist in the environment in free form. It absolutely should not be blowing around in the wind in Northern California, in the Sahara Desert perhaps, but not in Northern California. In fact, we know that the contamination is so horrific that now the streams are running with this metal, and in the last 10 years, aquatic insect life has declined by 90%. in the tributaries in Northern California. 90% is measured by Forest Service biologists. So again, we're talking about a crash, a virtual crash in the ecosystem. This is no joke, and it's doing the same thing to us. We can't take in a breath without sucking this stuff in, Ted.
You know, Dane, it really aggravates me because I leave my home now here in Central Florida, and we used to have all these beautiful citrus groves all around us. And mind you, they spray them all kinds of chemicals anyhow, which I don't like breathing the air around citrus groves anyhow. But now all the citrus groves are pretty much dying. I mean, they've all got blight. They're all dying because they've gotten so weak because the soil's been so contaminated with aluminum, and nobody wants to talk about it down here. Okay, let's go ahead and try to go to the rest of these phone calls. I'm going to have to go real quick now, guys, so please forgive me if I cut you off. Let's go to John in Michigan. Go ahead.
Dane, my brother took samples of water. You look at them through a microscope, you see these blue dots in there. I understand that Bill Gates and Monsanto are spraying copper, too, which is another toxic substance that builds up in our system to compromise our immune system. And the food source, the protein, which we need, is what they're under attack, too. But could you comment on the fallout of
the metals we know of, and we're seeing a different mix of metals in the chemically isonucleated mix, a different batch of metals. We've seen lead, copper, manganese, aluminum, barium, strontium. These metals are all highly toxic by themselves. When you combine them, you have what's called synergistic toxicity to become much more toxic, and I don't mean just a little bit. In the case of mercury and aluminum, the combination of those two metals can increase overall toxicity by as much as 10,000%, and that's a natural statistical fact. So again, we are breathing an incredibly horrific mix, and it will eventually destroy our health, each and every one of us. It is doing so slowly by the day.
Dave, I was out in California.
Dave in New York, go ahead. Dave in New York, go ahead.
The spraying copper in New Mexico, the contract was won by Microsoft Bioengineering. Copper is 28 times more toxic, supposedly, than aluminum. And I remember when they used to put copper sulfates in the lakes to keep the weeds down because it's such an effective deplanter, if you will. And used to drive copper spikes into a tree if you wanted to kill it. And Dr. Sherry Edwards from Sound Health Options, she actually picked up in people's voices copper toxicity. Out here on the East Coast, and something about factor 8, which, hemophiliacs are susceptible to or whatever.
Dave, I hate to cut you off. I got to finish these phone calls. Robbie in Ohio, go ahead.
Hey, Robbie in Ohio. Hey, thanks for taking my call. Just to help connect the dots, they want to destroy production of food production in the United States, so we have to rely on outside food coming in. It'll destroy the small farmer and drive it into the corporate part.
Okay, thanks for calling, Robbie. What do you think about that, Dane?
That's one of the agenda items, but again, people should look at the bigger items as well. We're talking about a global cataclysm right now with the methane in the Arctic, the damage they've done. They're trying to cover up some of the damage by doing more.